Concepts, Values and Wise Advice from the Billy Meier Context compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Belief, see also opinions, see also religion and religion.
Ask its explanations, Part 4.
It is unfortunately the case with the believers that they always shift their own responsibility onto a saint or onto dear God because they are not able to bear their own responsibility. Therefore, they also cannot make any of their own decisions and conclusions, which are really important for them.
Ask its explanations, Part 6.
I know truly that in your time the people live in the mistaken belief that I am the embodiment of creation. So then, in your time, they call me the Anointed One, and they thereby wander far from every truth, through deep darkness engendered by belief.
Contact Report 76. Manara. Delusional belief and misleading falsehoods tempt the seekers and researchers to take unreal and false paths. Contact Report 85.
In himself, Mr. Glanzmann, and thus also in his subconscious, as well as in his conscious, he is still deeply connected with religious concerns, which became the decisive factor for the malicious action of the subconscious. When registering the danger that it was known somewhere that contact with the other level was irretrievably interrupted, it regarded this statement as falsehood and acted very quickly. In a short time, it mobilized energies of defense to protect the illusionary things that exist within him, the energy nearest to it being the one which most strongly reveals its presence, the energies of religious faith for which Mr. Glanzmann himself is responsible, though he may deny this externally. But precisely these forces, those of religious belief, are the most powerful that exist on the earth, for they have arisen and exist in false and billion-fold subconscious thought energies of religious believers on the earth. These forces represent a tremendous agglomeration, a gigantic concentrative form, powers that enclose your world like a closed dome and often do evil damage. Connected with them are also tremendous concentrative forms of fluidal powers, which were also emitted by billions of faith-dependent earthlings and are still being emitted. It is these energies, now united in concentrative form and consequently also interacting, which were called into mobilization by the subconscious of Mr. Glanzmann and enclosed him as an impenetrable, protective vibrational and energy armor, which you recklessly tried to break through, which would inevitably have brought you premature death if you had not secured your position through doubly false coordinates. You cannot fight these belief energies and belief fluids, fluidal energies, in such a manner that you could render them ineffective. They are too strong and powerful even for us.
I know that now. I just do not understand that the religions constantly talk about these energies as the forces of darkness, because so much negative is evoked by them, while just and precisely through these religions themselves, these forces of darkness are generated.
They are not the religions.
I know they are in truth the believers in their crazy belief.
Of course. Unfortunately, they cannot be helped with all the truth. When it is explained to them that through their belief and their belief fluidal energies, they themselves generate those powers which they then call the powers of darkness, or the mights of darkness.
Contact Report 91.
But now I wonder what it must be like, or what happens when a teaching is negative.
If there is a negative doctrine, then the difference is that there is no self-generated connection to the doctrine disseminator and to his place of residence, but a compulsion that is based on fear and terror, namely that death and corruption arise in one's own body if the false doctrine disseminator is not obeyed in his or her orders. But the same also happens in the case of fanaticism or faith. So you see that the difference lies in the fact that in a true teaching of the truth a voluntary connectedness is produced, Whereas in a teaching of the untruth, or simply of the negative, a coercion and an obsession become decisive.
Contact Report 835.
Without exception, reality and its truth should be searched for and found and perceived, but not simply everything should be accepted on faith. This also means, for example, that everything that you and I speak, that I bring and teach in the form of the teaching of truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of life, as well as everything that I teach, explain and speak it all, must be independently, thoroughly, specifically considered and also lived and experienced by the students, learners, listeners, and readers themselves. The mere fact that only what I teach is then simply learned and read and simply accepted, and thus only believed, this excludes reality and its truth, and only promotes faith. Fundamentally, it means that the human being should comprehend everything and anything through their own efforts and concerns, as well as through a sensible and clear self-life and self-experience, precisely to the extent that it is possible for them, that they thereby recognize reality and its truth, and gains a certain certainty that what they have learned, heard, seen, experienced, and witnessed corresponds to reality. Opinions are, in truth, only views, ideas, and suppositions, as sometimes they are also only dreams or false doctrines, which are unconscionably spread, leading to belief, as is the case with religions. Through their false teachings, namely, the human being is only believing, whereby they always hope for the help of a higher power, such as a god, a saint, or a holy one, etc., but thereby completely disregard themselves and their own abilities and necessary efforts of self-regulating and self-working everything desired. In this manner, however, he or she atrophies with regard to any self-help, because all self-initiative of the human being is lost and they become helpless, in such a manner that others seize the initiative and he or she becomes dependent on them, especially those human beings who are addicted to a religious faith. These people live erroneously according to the completely thoughtless and religiously affiliated and absolutely idiotically false saying, God thinks and directs. In doing so, a fanatical and confused devotion to faith is displayed, which reveals how frighteningly the personal and real freedom of thought, as well as the logic, the intellect, and the reason of the human beings are degraded and demolished by religious faith in this respect in a lowly, intelligent manner. This happens in such a form that the human being is no longer himself or herself in any wise, but only a slave to his or her religious faith, and to those who pelt him or her with religious, and thus lying and deceitful heresies, and sponge his or her head full of nonsensical stories. Real and sensible thinking is disappearing. Consequently, the human being has long since fallen prey to illusory thinking, and the longer they fall prey to it, especially what is conditioned by religious faith and is deluded into believing religious nonsense. This, however, makes him or her more and more dependent, and also leads them to believe not only the lies of the respective religion and its representatives, but also the lies and deceptions of the majority of politicians.
Contact Report 836.
To only consume knowledge is not the way of real learning, but the way of faith. Consequently, every Earth human has to stimulate his or her own thoughts in order to get on with what is given or has been given.
Contact Report 851.
It will only be possible for the human beings, and they will slowly, very slowly begin to understand everything when belief, religious and secular, finally disappears.
Contact Report 852.
The human being himself, who has classified himself to a faith, has formed an opinion. However, such an opinion, like faith, is in any case false and biased, because faith and opinion are fundamentally the same thing, so that a faith is an opinion, and an opinion is a faith. Opinion and belief can be set right and discussed, so their falsity and partiality, for they completely exclude any neutrality or other neutral form. However, It is only of correctness to take this into account and to put it into practice in this way if a human being is not directly or indirectly attacked with regard to his opinion and belief, but is always and in every case correctly approached and spoken to. This means that in every case, even with a human being who holds a secular opinion or has a religious belief, which is actually the same thing, correctly speaking, normal conversation can and should take place without his or her belief or opinion being brought into play. Consequently, even a person without an opinion, an atheist or a non-believer in any other way, can speak normally and without insinuation to a human being about his or her faith or opinion, and meet him or her respectfully and neutrally if the human being has an opinion or is devoted to a religious faith. Only then can and may his opinion or belief be discussed, if he so desires, although the speech and answer should always and in every case be conducted in such a way that it is neutral and violates neither the opinion nor the belief. Otherwise, however, if a human being does not wish to be addressed directly concerning his opinion or belief, whereby an unwanted personal address in this regard is always wrong, it should be correct and permissible in a general form that concerning religious or secular opinions as well as a belief, the falsity or correctness may be discussed and the truth may be said and stated. This is something I have already learnt with Svath, and which was very useful when I visited human beings together with him, who were religious creeds or simply held opinions. This behavior also helped me when I traveled alone through many countries and went in and out of believing families, churches, mosques and temples, etc., and never caused offense. Belief in God and gods, etc., as well as in ideals, never conveys the truth, because to really gather true knowledge and to see and hear reality, and thus to perceive reality and realities in every form, remains denied to every person of faith. Opinions and beliefs, as well as ideals, etc., create wrongdoing, murder and manslaughter, suffering, sorrow and distress, hatred, unconscionability, revenge and retribution, killing of every kind, destruction, annihilation, extinction, and endless evil.
Contact Report 857.
Out of this religious or worldly belief arises all that goes wrong with the earthling, namely his greed, addiction, and delusion for something or other, such as money, might, rule, wealth, or land. This, however, as also revenge and retaliation stir in him when something goes against him, as when another human being is of a different mind than himself, when a human being lovingly turns to another, and he himself is written off, he does not get what he wants, etc. The human being who believes, only believes and holds fast to his illusory thinking and brings harm to himself, which is what I want to say with a poem I once put together. Faith is the believer's ruling power, which forges him and creates the evil in him. He is only believing and swollen by it in himself. His illusory thinking is his tool of willing. His faith only deludes him with false joys and brings him evil hope and suffering. By his faith he breaks the seal of life, therefore his life is only a mirror of his thoughts.
Contact Report 862.
Thus, through the appearance and the misleading teaching of the foreigners to the earth humans, exactly the wrong thing was done, which has been preserved until today, namely, that which should never become with the human beings, namely, a faith in place of thinking for oneself and grasping reality and truth.
The urge to kill is a moment of character, for if the human being does not consciously form himself into true human beinghood, then the urge to kill, that is to say to murder, settles deep in his character, and comes out into the open when the opportunity arises. So it also happens with hatred, with revenge, retaliation, and persecution, as well as with anger, lies, deceit, and jealousy, which in many cases lead to the end of a relationship and to murder and manslaughter.
That is absolutely correct, and the fact that that is very prevalent here on Earth, that goes back to the beliefs that are not simple in human beings, but diverse, and that
is not only religiously and worldly simple, but is ever so diverse in itself, without a believing human being ever noticing that his faith has many variations, and that he thinks and acts according to them, as the case may be, but mistakenly thinks that he acts only according to one variation of his faith, if he ever notices at all that his faith is not uniform. As I have often said, not even the religiously fractured know that their faith has the most diverse layers and wavering nuances. This needs to be said for once.
Contact Report 863.
1949, verily. Throughout life, the human being has the choice to choose right or wrong, but it is up to each person alone, or to a group or organization, etc., to choose, in each case led by a person who, as a rule, is not of a faith and is also not fanatical, and therefore has power over his senses, consequently also with regard to reality and its truth. If, however, the wrong choice is made, then the result is that the thoughts are unfree, unwholesome and somehow trapped. This because a belief has been built up in the human being through indoctrination, which consequently influences his thoughts continuously, and unnoticed by him, through his faith. This has a constant and subterranean effect. Consequently, only an illusory thinking is made possible, which is not only alien to reality, but fundamentally unfree, unhealthy, and dependent, and only pretends to be a thinking of logic, understanding, and reason, but is subterraneously controlled by faith. Consequently, the whole thing can never lead to success, especially for the individual not to a successful life and true humanity, not least because he is tempted by faith not to form his character fundamentally well. This is so that nothing evil, wrong, unbalanced, unjust, and offensive, etc., lies deep in his character, which immediately erupts outwardly and has an evil effect if only the slightest cause triggers this. In my opinion, the majority of Earthlings have not grown up in consciousness and with regard to reality and its truth since 1949, but only in the form of their bodies, as a result of which they cannot cultivate free, open, and independent thoughts. On the contrary, they cherish only such thoughts as make them unfree and enslave them by their erroneous and confused belief in a God, Son of God, saint or angel, etc., or in Satan. This burdens them so much that they can only conduct their thought work in the form of illusory thinking. This, however, leads to religious aberrations, such as in Persia or Iran, where women are whipped because they do not wear headscarves. As there and in Afghanistan, human beings are stoned and otherwise executed, and thus killed or murdered because they are not of the same mind as the religiously fanatical rulers, as I have already seen with Svath in the future, as well as many other things. But this does not concern the bulk of the peoples, and especially the rulers who slimily are only shocked and sympathetic, according to their mouths, and thus only feign the pity and compassion as well as sympathy, but truthfully do not even give a clean, honest and compassionate thought to what is being done to the human beings, and they are being mistreated, tortured, sexually abused, or even killed.
Contact Report 864.
1947. Whatever thoughts the human being plays with, bad or good, which lead to legal proceedings or cause a contact to be broken off, cause the human being to move to another place or quit his job, in the future and at the latest from the second millennium onwards, it will generally only be the power of words that lead to wrong, and thus incorrect thoughts being cherished, trapped in a belief, which creates unfreedom, unpeace, lack of clarity and unsteadiness. To do this, however, and to act accordingly, will bring the human being discord and unhappiness. This because he forces it for a long time through his misguided thoughts and ignores and represses all truth, which thereby will never bring him further in the future to live with the laws of the planet and its nature. 1940s. If bad and believing thoughts also create corresponding feelings, then the cerebral cortex is also damaged, that is to say, important parts of the cortex, namely because the processing of emotions is carried out badly. Bad, dependent, and especially faith-based thoughts give rise to just such feelings, which in turn give rise to similar emotions. Basic rules of man.
Basic _rules of man. Each human being shall not believe in anything, but shall always search for the basic truth, which he can only find within himself if he searches and thinks about everything, and by using his reason, his understanding and his sound logic. Thus the human being may find the truth only within himself, but only if he is free of any belief in things he can never prove within himself. Belief is not proof, but simply something that is assumed to be kind, desirable and right, without any provable content of truth. Consequently, a belief can never be cogent, because of the fact that the provable truth is missing.